Why black folks still love pig's feet, the most controversial soul food in history. Now imagine it is the 20th century. Somewhere down the road, the local juke joint plays B.B. King's voice humming softly through the radio, his new hit 3 o'clock blues floating out into the room like molasses. A tired black man is finishing up his shift as a Pullman porter and is getting ready to come home to a hot meal. His wife, who is wearing a floral house dress, carefully plates the meat, still glistening, and places it in front of her husband, who just stepped through the door after a 12-hour shift as a Pullman porter on the Illinois Central Railroad. He has hung up his cap. He's tired. But as he dips a piece of cornbread into the tangy broth and takes that first bite, his whole body exhales. Because this meal represents comfort and history. Scope News decided to do a deep dive into why some black folks still love pig's feet and why some don't. Pig's feet were never meant to be special. They were survival food, born in the worst conditions and cooked with the best intentions. Enslaved Africans weren't given ribeye or loin, they were given scraps. Pig's feet, hog maws, tails, and intestines were what the white masters didn't want. These parts were tossed aside as refuse, as garbage, as beneath white consumption. But black hands picked them up, cleaned them, seasoned them, and turned them into meals that not only filled bellies, but healed spirits. Boiled for hours to soften the tough connective tissue, stewed in vinegar and spices, or pickled in glass jars to last without refrigeration, pig's feet were high in fat, rich in protein, and cost next to nothing. For families with many mouths to feed and barely a dollar to spare, it was the only meat they could rely on. Seasonings like garlic, pepper, onions, and bay leaf masked the smell and added flavor, while cornbread or rice made it stretch further. In the South, this dish wasn't just a meal. It was a reminder that even when the world gives you nothing, you make something. When the Great Migration carried millions of black families north to cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland, they brought their food with them. What was once cooked in a pot behind a slave cabin was now found in corner stores, juke joints, and working-class kitchens. Pickled pig's feet floated in vinegar behind dusty gas station counters, sealed in jars beside candy and cold sodas. Elders grabbed them as quick snacks, a bite of home that cost less than $1. For some, the sight of a glass jar filled with trotters was a childhood memory. For others, it was a dare. But either way, it meant something. And then there's New Year's. In countless Southern and black households, pig's feet still show up on the table beside black-eyed peas and collard greens. The tradition is tied to superstition and survival. Black-eyed peas for coins, greens for cash, and pig's feet for strength, progress, and grounding. Unlike chickens who scratch backward or cows who stand still, pigs root forward. Eating pig's feet on New Year's is said to keep your life moving in the right direction. Even among those who've sworn off pork, you'll still find them cooking the traditional meal for elders out of respect. It's not just food, it's protection. But not everyone still sees it that way. In the 1980s and 90s, health awareness swept through Black America. With rising concerns about hypertension, diabetes, and heart disease, pork became the new enemy. Suddenly, pig's feet were labeled unhealthy, disgusting, or slave food. Some turned to veganism or pescatarian diets. Others embraced religious paths that rejected pork entirely. Islam, Hebrew Israelite teachings, even Seventh-day Adventist beliefs. The image of pig's feet went from proud and practical to backward and shameful. For many young black folks, the food their grandparents once prized became a punchline. But that shame doesn't sit well with everybody. For those who grew up poor or who remember their grandmother's tiny kitchen, pig's feet aren't a symbol of oppression. They're a symbol of strength. A lot of elders didn't survive off salmon fillets and kale salads. They survived off what they could afford. They fed entire households from one pot of bones and broth. And they made it taste like a feast. There's pride in that. Today, some black chefs are reimagining pig's feet. They're braising them in red wine, serving them over grits, plating them like art. Others keep it traditional, bringing them to reunions and church events, not to shock, but to honor. Even in fine dining circles, the pig's foot is having a moment, And maybe that's the irony. What was once thrown away is now being reclaimed, both by the people who had no choice and by those choosing to remember. This soul food dish has always been controversial. It forces people to confront their past. It raises questions about what's healthy, what's shameful, and what's worth preserving. But the truth is, pig's feet were never just about the meat. They were about the memory. The black grandmother who stirred the pot after cleaning houses all day. The railroad man who came home to a hot plate after working in silence around white passengers who refused to look him in the eye. The families that made it through generations of poverty with nothing but ingenuity, spice, and faith. So whether you like your pig's feet pickled or stewed, this is a meal still rich in culture and history. Somewhere deep in the bayous of Mississippi, Plaquemine, or maybe closer to Natchez if you ask him, there's an old-school black man pushing 80, sitting on his porch with nothing but time. He's got a tin plate in his lap, a cold drink in one hand, and a jar of pickled pig's feet cracked open beside him. He snaps a saltine, takes a bite, and leans back without a care in the world. No doctor's lecture, no trendy diet, no judgment can touch him here. He says, "This right here been good to me longer than most people have." And he smiles like he means it. Scope News tells the truth. Here are the facts. This report is grounded in historical memory, culinary scholarship, and real oral traditions passed down through generations of black families across the South and Midwest. To trace the story of pig's feet in Black America, we consulted archives on enslaved foodways, documents from the Library of Congress's Born in Slavery collection, interviews from the Southern Foodways Alliance, and community recollections preserved in black newspapers and church cookbooks dating back to the 1940s. Special thanks to Retro Vision Archives. We cross-referenced migration patterns with food studies from universities like Howard and Tulane, examined cultural reflections in juke joint menus and corner store records, and reviewed black holiday traditions that place pig's feet on the New Year's table. We also drew from interviews with elderly residents in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas, people who still remember a time when pig's feet meant survival, not shame. This video isn't based on trend pieces or online lists. It's built from the ground up, from lived experience, generational memory, and the hard truth of what it meant to eat what others threw away and make it taste like love. No frills, no filters, just the real story, the way black folks lived it and passed it on. Legal disclaimer. This content is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes. Viewer discretion is advised. Scope News aims to reflect history and lived experience with as much accuracy as possible. Some images, quotes, and interpretations are reflective of cultural memory and legacy. We encourage independent research and critical thought.